Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life,
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the 817 podcast, where we talk news, politics, culture, everything in the city of Fort Worth and Tarrant County. Today, we have an interview with Mr. Robert Sturns. He's been on the podcast before. It's been a while. We were trying to remember how long it's been, but he was like an OG of coming on the podcast for us. But he is the Director of Economic Development for the city of Fort Worth. So when we're talking small business, corporate relocation, anything that has to do with economic development, him and his team are the group behind that. So this is a great interview. We really enjoyed having him on again, and we hope you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start with an introduction, like what you've been up to since we last been on here. Let's imagine it was 2 years ago.
Sure.
Post-pandemic, Robert, what's that look like? And then we'll ask you questions.
All right. Well, post-pandemic, Robert is still trying to get the weight off that he gained during the pandemic. That's the first thing I got to deal with. But so I guess the last time we talked, I think we had either just finished up the CARES Act funding program, or we were still in the middle of it. But so that was really our big shift as a result of the pandemic, and really trying to support and help our small businesses. And so really spent 2020 and then 2021, you had all the compliance tied to that. So, that was really taking up the huge amount of our time, and it was very worthwhile. I mean, I think Fort Worth probably fared a little better than a lot of other cities. I still hear, communities that are just now at this point, just starting to really get out of, full on mask mandates and everything. And so it was a very interesting time for us. And as a result of that, coming out of the pandemic and kind of how the world had changed since then, we had another refresh of our strategic plan. Really had Tip Strategies come in and just talk to us and really research what had changed. I mean, we'd gone through a lot the past few years, from the pandemic to racial unrest and focus on DEI, and what are the things that Fort Worth needed to be doing over the next few years, because I don't know that the plan that we had was necessarily reflective of what was going on in the community and in the business world at that time. So that was, we had them come in, and they took a little bit more of a streamlined approach. So, our original plan was 500 plus pages. This was significantly smaller, more concise, and really, and that was kind of at our request. I really wanted them to kind of drill down on, those specific things that we need to begin to addressing. So, let's not spend as much time on, a lot of the research and stuff that had already been done. Let's just really kind of focus on what had changed since then. And so that resulted in kind of a couple of things. One, we refined our target industries. And so we kind of narrowed those down into mobility, aerospace and defense, energy, culture, which is really kind of a broad mix of arts and entertainment and tourism, which we really partner with Visit Fort Worth on. And then anchors and innovators, which is really our kind of corporate headquarter piece of it. And then since then, we've really been working towards implementing those strategies. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of our immediate focus has been on the revitalization piece and the small business piece. And that's really, I think, reflective of, and I may have said this when we talked last time, I think the economic development profession coming out of the pandemic had a real shift. Everyone prior to that was corporate recruitment all the time. That's what we're going after. And then we had this pandemic hit, and we're like, well, wait a minute, we don't have programs set up for our small businesses. We don't have these things in place that can ensure that, we can keep and retain the businesses that we have. And I heard that from, economic development folks across the country, and so that's really where we really begin to drill down on, okay, what are we doing? Now that we've had this grant program to help sustain our small businesses and kind of get them through the pandemic. What else? What else do we do with them? And so that's been a focus. And then obviously the revitalization efforts, which Black and brown businesses were hit disproportionately due to the pandemic. We still had neighborhoods that haven't had investment even before the pandemic, and so we launched this new strategy called Full Strength Fort Worth, which is really on the basis of clear statement that Fort Worth can only be as strong as its neighborhoods and its communities, and if we don't have our neighborhoods being invested in, we're not reaching our full potential as a city. And so that's been a lot of our efforts. We launched the Main Street program. We did the CDFI Fort Worth program, which we're doing with the Department of Diversity and Inclusion. We're partnered with Techstars. We had a tech incubator going here. I think they're going to be starting their first cohort next month. I believe it's in September. They'll get that going. And so really been trying to, and obviously that was helped by getting the ARPA dollars too as well. So, we got that additional federal funding. And so how do we continue to drive some of those dollars into these programs? And so we were able to do the CDFI thing with ARPA, the Techstars program with ARPA, partnership with the county on that as well. And so that's really been where a lot of our focus has been. And not to say that we're not still chasing corporate headquarters, because we are doing that. And we've had a lot of interest on what I would call some mega projects. We went through the Rivian exercise and spent a significant amount of time going after that project, and we'll see how that plays out. I continue to watch the news on Rivian, and it's been interesting what kind of feedback I've been seeing from Georgia about the plant and how that's impacting the community. So we'll see how that plays out and whether that was a lost opportunity or whether that was a blessing in disguise that they decided to move on to another site. But we've got a lot of good projects in the pipeline, and we're going to keep pushing on that, and I think we'll eventually land one of those.
Yeah, I feel like there's a ton that we can start to unpack from that. Maybe we'll start big and move smaller.
I already wrote down 4 questions, so whatever you got over there from what he said.
So you ended talking about corporate relocations, and I feel like that's the bigger flashy name brand type of thing. Right. So for people like us who are just see the news about it, get to read articles about it, what's the behind the scenes? How does a corporate relocation work?
Wow. There's really not a cookie cutter approach to corporate relocations. I would say the majority of them are coming through site selectors for the most part. And so they typically have an RFP process that they go through where, communities will get just an Excel spreadsheet says, look, we're looking for sites that meet these criteria. Submit your sites, and you've got a really quick turnaround to get that done. From that, they kind of collect all these data points from all the communities that they're considering, and then they begin it's a cut down. It's just okay that this community has a site, this one doesn't, and they go through that process and they whittle it down, and they'll usually go through about 2 or 3 down select type of processes where they'll continue to refine what they're looking for. And, once they get down to, a handful of sites, then they'll start conducting site visits. So they will come out to the communities. They'll meet with city, chamber, businesses, local political leaders. Sometimes the governor's involved, and just really kind of doing the initial pitch on why you should choose Fort Worth versus some of the other sites. And then they'll go through another, down select process there, and then they'll narrow it down to maybe 2 or 3 sites. And then that's when it really starts getting pretty detailed on both the infrastructure side, in case there are needs there, and then probably on the incentive side, and then what that looks like. And then they begin comparing offers that they may have from other communities against what we're putting in play. And so that's really how it works. And the site selectors have a pretty definitive time frame that they're working on. So it's not a process that well, I will say it typically it doesn't drag out. I mean, they've got a pretty set schedule that they're
Mm-hmm.
working on, where you tend to see it play out, and this kind of happened with Rivian, is once they were kind of down to two sites, then there was just like a lot of back and forth on um, different kind of questions we were trying to answer for them. And so that's when you're kind of getting into weekly meetings with the client, and that could go on for a couple of months until they finally reach a decision point. So that's the what I would say kind of the traditional way that projects come in. The other way that you do it is really where I think when I've talked about this, Chambers talked about it, where we've been a little bit lacking is kind of the forward thinking, aggressive. We're gonna develop a target list of 20 companies, and we're gonna go out and just talk to them this year. And that's a little bit harder because you're kind of cold calling on a company. You don't know if they're interested in moving. You do a lot of research on different communities, who the headquarters are they experiencing any issues? Are there workforce issues, talent issues? Is it a corporate tax structure that's a little bit challenging that Fort Worth and Texas could be better on? And so you're kind of cold calling and hoping that you can get in the door and make an argument for your community. And even that process, it may be, you may have a meeting and it may be months before they say, yeah, I really liked what that group said about Fort Worth. Let me, maybe we'll take a team down there and we'll go visit and just take a look around and see what we think. And if you got some interest there, then you start basically the same process. So it's really, what are the entry points? Is it coming through a site selection process, or is it coming through our ability to go out and talk to a client up front and just sell the city on what we think the benefits are?
So I kind of have the Bloomberg on while I work, and I felt like Fort Worth was often in the Rivian deal. Often seemed like the word being used. I didn't. So I was wondering, was that to you all like, oh, that must mean something, or was that more us having more of a proactive relationship with media to get excitement around Fort Worth? It seemed like there was a lot of Fort Worth in the news at the time as the option.
Yeah. Well, I think that was partially intentional, and then partially, I think, just once the word got out that Fort Worth was on the short list, then you had a lot of media that were reaching out to us. But we have intentionally over the past year been doing a lot of initiatives around the marketing standpoint, connecting with media just to make sure they understand Fort Worth's story. We talked about it last time. The original plan. Back when the city was the 15th largest in the country, and everyone thought we were something like 46th or something. So, across the country, people think we're this small town. And we just said, look, we can't continue to let people think that we are just this sleepy suburb of Dallas. We've got to be proactive about that. And that's when we brought Andrea Duffy on, who's my communications specialist, and she's really done a huge amount of work in just laying the groundwork and reaching out to national media, talking about the story. So with Rivian, she was really kind of laying some breadcrumbs out there for the national press to get their interest. And then more recently, we've engaged Schaefer Advertising, who's helping us doing a full-on marketing campaign. So you've probably seen some new branding efforts that we've got out there. We've got, if you're out at DFW Airport, you may see you got some signage out there in the electronic billboards within the terminals, and a lot of stuff we've really sent out to the communities that we compete against, or where we see some interest, where we're seeing interest from companies. So most of the advertising is really out in those outward markets. So you'll see a little bit here in Fort Worth, but the majority of that's outward market, and that's just trying to raise our profile and just elevate Fort Worth. So that's kind of part of that aggressive piece of let's get Fort Worth's name out there, because at the end of the day, you don't know when a CEO is sitting around a boardroom with his board of directors and saying, yeah, I don't really like this community anymore. This community has some challenges and I want to move. Well, if Fort Worth is top of mind, if they saw an ad and said, yeah, I really like that what Fort Worth is putting out there. I'm interested in seeing what that community has. That's really when you can make those inroads with them. So it's better that they have some knowledge of the community than us calling them out of the blue and saying, hey, we're right next to Dallas. So you may have heard of Dallas. We're right next to them, and we really like you guys to come out and see us. So I think it's been pretty critical for us. And then the other piece of that, the third leg of the advertising stool is we've been working with Visit Fort Worth and a PR firm, Quinn PR. So, while Andrea's working with Schaefer on the branding and marketing exercise, kind of Quinn is working on the public relations piece. And so they've been very successful in getting the mayor out to talk about different things that are going on in Fort Worth. We just had a article in Fast Company that the mayor was doing, where she talked about the open space conservation program and how we're looking to utilize that as a potential incentive lure for some companies who are focused on green initiatives and really interested in trying to preserve that green space. So those are the types of things that I think will lead to some real benefits for us.
Yeah, talking about Andrea and like the behind the scenes team, can you give us insight into what the economic development department looks like people wise, and then what are some of the things that y'all have been doing over the last couple of years to lay the groundwork for Fort Worth moving forward?
Sure. I've heard you guys talk about us every once in a while. We're still a little mean and lean over here. So it's really it's a staff of 17, and so we've got myself, my assistant director Ori Fernandez. We've got Andrea doing the marketing. We have Michael Hennig, who is our economic development manager, who's doing really the recruitment and revitalization aspects. Cherie Gordon, who just joined us, she's kind of focused on recruitment. Telemachus Evans and Martha Collins focused on revitalization. And then we are got Kelly Baggett, who does our innovation work, hoping to add a position next year, knock on wood, as we get through the budget process, see if we can add one person to focus, have a little bit more effort on our small business development. Then we have our kind of compliance research team that works with us. So they're kind of doing a lot of the back office work with the TIFs and the PIDs and all of that work. That tax increment financing and public improvement districts for those who don't get the acronym. So and so that's really the group. So I think our success and our ability to move things forward really relies on leveraging our partnerships, right? So we still have, if you compare us to other cities of our size, we're still kind of very small in the staffing standpoint when it comes to comparing us to other communities. So it's really leveraging the partnerships with our chambers, both the downtown chamber, the Black and Hispanic chamber. Visit Fort Worth, been an outstanding partner with us, and then just our other partners within the city. I mean, Christina Brooks with diversity and equity, and she's just been outstanding in working with us and on the CDFI program. And then Christina's the one that brought that to us. She worked on that up in South Bend and brought the program to us, and we've really been walking hand in hand and trying to get that thing set up and moving forward. So to the extent that we can build on and connect with our other partners, that really governs the success that we have.
Yeah. It seems like if, and I'm this may be a dumb question, but if economic development is maybe funded by decisions the city has made to receive cash, is there a need or a thought process, or can it happen always through Visit Fort Worth? Where Visit Fort Worth, right, it's out of the city. They found a economic model to sustain their initiative, if not grow their initiatives and grow their budgets. Is there any thoughts or need to do that from an economic development team side to be able to create that same kind of sustainable high growth funding for you guys?
Sure. And that's something that we've talked about and actually have are in the process of putting that in motion. So a lot of other communities will utilize an economic development corporation, particularly in Texas, 4A, 4B communities. So those are communities that are below a certain size, and I'll,
Mm.
you look at your
Mhm.
Friscos and Planos and Allens and et cetera. So, they were many years ago, decades ago, they were complaining, hey, we can't compete against Fort Worth and Dallas. We need a tool to help us do that. And so the legislature allowed them to bank sales tax for economic development purposes. And so, over the years, they have been able to amass, these huge war chests of dollars, and that also supports their organization. So they're kind of outside of the traditional city. They've got a board that they report to, but they're funding projects and funding the organization through that 4A, 4B sales tax. So with us, we've been over the years, since legally we can't create a 4A, 4B corporation, what we have been doing is, trying to develop funding streams. So the local development corporation, which is really just a arm of the city council, separate arm of the city council. We had some property that we sold, and so we utilized some portion of those proceeds. Actually, we had a couple of properties, so we utilized the proceeds from those sales, put that aside for an economic development fund. It's small. It's not in any way competing with the Planos and Allens of the world, but it got us started. Then we and worked through the budget process. David Cook, our city manager, said, yeah, we want to continue to kind of fund economic development. So we've had a $2 million allocation in last year's budget just for the economic development fund. And then we should have another $2 million allocation in this upcoming budget year. And then the concept that we've really been working on with council is we've got TIFs that are getting ready to expire. And so the idea for these TIFs as they've expired, this is revenue that has up till now been diverted into a tax increment financing fund, so it's not in the city's general fund. So when the TIFs expire, all that revenue, that new revenue that's been generated by these TIFs, flows back to the city. And the thought was that we would utilize that for tax rate reduction, and so we're still going to do some tax rate reduction with that. But we were able to talk to the council and say, look, instead of doing all of that new revenue for tax rate reduction, let's carve out a small portion of that, and that can serve as our economic development fund, and that could be a sustainable way that we can fund ourselves without impacting the general fund at all. So this is not taking existing dollars away from the general fund. Again, new money, so it would have no impact on existing services. And what's really good about that is that does allow us to kind of build up a larger war chest. And in many cases, it allows us to do cash grants for projects. So instead of doing a 10-year tax abatement or a 15-year Chapter 380 grant, we can say, okay, we want to provide for this company to have X amount of dollars, but instead of doing this long 10 or 15-year program, we're going to pay that out upfront, and maybe we pay it over a 3-year period, right? So maybe you get a tranche when construction's completed, maybe you get a tranche when you hit some employee milestones, and you can kind of layer that in. So that gives us some flexibility on just the kind of the large scale recruitment side, but it also helps us on the office recruitment, which is, offices are still a little bit in play right now. But, if you have an office user that wants to come into existing property in Fort Worth, they're going to bring some personnel, they're going to bring the talent, they're going to bring some equipment, but it's not that they're not building a new building, so they're not really creating a lot of new increment that you can use for an incentive. Well, with this fund, that allows us to say, okay, IT company, finance company, you want to come take 75,000 square feet of vacant space in downtown? Great, you're going to bring your equipment. We're going to use this fund to incentivize you, and that allows us to be a little bit more aggressive on those opportunities than we would be able to be on just trying to utilize a Chapter 380 or a tax abatement. And then the other piece of the fund, we want to use that to continue our revitalization efforts. So again, particularly when you have kind of some small scale redevelopment in our revitalization areas, not generating a lot of huge new tax increment, we can fund those types of projects, and then continue to work with our partners like Near Southside and DFWI. So one of the big components of this is, Near Southside operates the TIF 4, Southside TIF. That expires at the end of this year. And so we wanted to ensure that we had a way to continue to support near Southside because they're just doing some outstanding work over there. And why would why would you say, okay, the TIF's done, you guys go away? I mean, Mike, Brennan, and Megan and the team over there, they're just done outstanding work. So we want to try to continue to fund them to some extent to help that development, that redevelopment continue to happen. And then downtown Fort Worth Inc. has been doing a great job in downtown. And so we want to try to continue to fund them to continue their work in enhancing and beautifying downtown. So there'll be a lot of different things tied into this fund. We'll probably have more ideas on how to use it than we'll have money to use, but it gives us a good start. And so we're excited about that. Will we ever become a true economic development corporation when we're spun off entirely from the city? I don't know. I think it'll be somewhat dependent on how the first few years of the funds goes, and if council sees a benefit that this model is working, maybe a future council will consider
that. That's a ton of great information. I'm like still processing all of it.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna move to a question I had prepared so that I can keep thinking through everything.
Okay.
So one thing you talked about in the open was a lot of the Fort Worth's target industries. Some of them are very narrow: aerospace and defense, mobility, logistics, energy, healthcare, life sciences, and then others are more broad: culture, anchors, and innovators. What led to landing maybe on the more broad ones? Like, I think we obviously like Lockheed Martin and everything that goes on with healthcare here. Like, it makes sense that Fort Worth continued to develop those areas. But the things like culture, anchors, and innovators, how does recruiting something like that that's not as narrow go?
Yeah. Well, I think whenever you're developing target industries, you're really kind of faced with a interesting challenge. How narrow do you want it to be? And so in some cases, it does make sense to really narrow down. And I think that's where you see like some of the mobility stuff in the aerospace, as you said. I mean, there are specific areas within those targets that I think we want to spend our time on. Something like culture and anchors and innovators, I think you go broad because you're really not sure, what is going to be the innovative thing, next year. I mean, I don't know that we would have been sitting here 5 years ago saying electric vehicles were going to be this huge thing that they are now. Maybe 10 years ago, but so you don't know what the next new technology is going to be, right? So if you really start to define that and limit yourself on that, you may not be able to capture the next great opportunity that comes up that you may not be on the radar screen right now. So that's really kind of the thinking about why some of those are very narrowly tailored, and then some of those are a little bit more broad sense as to what we're trying to go on. So just to give us some flexibility and different opportunities that may come up that we think there's a value. But I think in general, we recognize that Fort Worth has a lot to offer, and particularly from our general culture and what we provide as a city. I mean, it's kind of unique. We're still kind of playing on the Old West feel and everything that's happening in the stockyards, and that's been outstanding. So that's still kind of our backbone. But how do we kind of expand that? And we talked about, Visit Fort Worth campaign with the Modern West and how that kind of reframes and refocuses what that means. So we just want to continue to kind of play in that space a little bit and make sure that we're staying true to our roots while trying to be as open and creative as we can be on the next big thing that may come down the pipeline that says, that could be a great fit in Fort Worth. Let's go after that.
I guess kind of follow up to that, like if we're talking about innovators and anchors, like this past week, Fort Worth-based agency that landed like Nike's whole marketing contract.
Right.
When there's an announcement like that or something like that happens, what is the reaction of economic development, or like what's the action that's taken after that, if any, to try and continue to like piggyback and capitalize off of the notoriety that comes with that?
Sure, sure. Well, it's really, you begin to, when you want to publicize that, obviously. So you want to make sure that this is not just a story that we're telling to people in Fort Worth. I mean,
Mhm.
other people outside the city need to know it. But then it's, you begin to look at, well, what are the other industries or what are the other companies in this industry? Maybe they're suppliers that could be a part of this initiative. So if you've got this contract, people are going to have to supply that. So is that materials? Is it other type of soft skill businesses that you need to bring in. So it's really how do we, how do we take this initiative that's landed here and then try to leverage that for additional growth and opportunities and jobs. And so yeah, that's part of the thinking when you have those types of announcements, and that happens a lot. I mean, it's funny. People will call and they'll say, well, give us a list of all the projects that have come to Fort Worth, and I could give you a list, and I'd say probably a quarter of those we actually worked on from a kind of traditional economic development
Mhm.
standpoint, whether we incentivized it or we got to help in the development permitting process. But you have a lot of companies that are just coming here. They understand the opportunity. They're not looking for incentives. They think we have the workforce. They've got the right site. And they just come here. And so, those are always the best kind of companies to have. I told a group, I was doing a presentation, I think, earlier this year, and I said, my goal is to put myself out of business, that we create a community that is so enticing and so creative and has the right talent and workforce that they're not coming to us for incentives at all, because the community itself is the draw. Will we ever get to that point? I don't know if that'll happen, but that should be the goal. I mean, you want to have the building blocks that makes the community attractive, regardless of whether there's incentives involved in the process.
Maybe when that happens, you can join us as a co-host on 817 Podcast.
Sounds good. I'm up
We
for
pay
that. I'm
pretty
up for
well.
that.
You'll have a lot of time on your hands.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah. So you just mentioned you said a lot there, and I wrote questions down. But the first one you talked about getting the talent to support the company who's bringing here, who's coming
Yep.
here. Do we have the talent base? And right, a lot of that's education, a lot of that's training. And recently there is kind of conversations, right, with the whole semiconductors things going on in the chip bill.
Right.
Taiwan Semiconductor not being, the CEO kind of came out and was like, honestly, this Arizona thing's been kind of a debacle in a way. Like
Right.
it's costing more money and we're not finding the talent.
Yep.
How do we be more proactive on making sure the talent is there for that moment?
Yeah, it's the talent question is really a challenge. And if I would say that there was one thing that was really impacting us. Yeah, I hate to put it that way. I would, but it is a factor, right? And it's really the first question that a lot of these companies ask us. So kind of after, you kind of go through one or two down selects and you've got a site that works. The first question in the door is not how much incentives are you going to give me? It's like, tell me about the workforce. Where am I getting people from? What kind of skill sets do you have? Here's the type of jobs that we're trying to do. How many people do you have in the Metroplex that are doing this type of work? And so it's a struggle in some cases. I think entities like Tarrant County College has been really focused on doing some things on the workforce side that I think are helpful. But you've really got to get into, and I know the mayor's talked about this a lot. I mean, you got to get the K through 12. You got to start early, and you got to have this pipeline all the way through college. I mean, it's just not, it's not rocket science. I mean, that's what you have to do. I mean, you're not going to start growing talent by just focusing on the college graduates you have. You have to go back further and really create this pipeline of talent that you're growing here. And then I think you have to be attractive to to high skilled workers who may, especially now with some interesting opportunities to work remote. How do we attract some of those workers that may love the community and love the amenities that Fort Worth has, but don't necessarily have to work here. They have opportunities to work remote. And so it's kind of a two-pronged effort of making sure that the community is attractive, as we talked about earlier, to bring people here. And I think you're seeing that by just, some of the general population growth that we're having, but then also ensuring that we are doing what we can to partner with the ISDs and Tarrant County College, universities, and create that workforce. And so that's why I think initiatives like Texas A&M's expansion into downtown. I mean, having a tier one university with a huge presence in downtown with a focus on innovation, I mean, that's going to be big. It's
Huge,
going to be
yeah.
huge for us. So I think as we just continue to focus on those initiatives, the talent piece will come. And the good thing about the Fort Worth Dallas Metroplex is that companies that are locating here, you're drawing from talent from the entire Metroplex. I mean, again, it's a 45-minute drive depending on where you're at from Fort Worth to Dallas, and so if you are, and this is also what's a little bit frustrating, is that you can locate in Las Colinas and still attract people from Fort Worth that'll make that drive for a high paying job. And so, companies are fairly agnostic, to be honest with you. We here in the Metroplex, we beat our chests about Fort Worth, Dallas, Arlington, Irving. Companies are agnostic. They're like, okay, I'm going to be, they refer to it as the Dallas region. I'm going to be in the Dallas region. I'm going to locate next to, I'm going to be in an area where I know there are workers doing the type of work that we're doing. And if I need to draw from a larger base, I've got this entire metroplex of 8 million people that I can pull from. So that's why the corporate headquarters piece is a little bit challenging, because they're tending to cluster. Corporate headquarters are kind of like fast food restaurants in some ways. I mean,
Yeah.
you got a McDonald's, you got a Burger King, you got a Whataburger. They all cluster around each other. Finance, banking, IT, they cluster. That's what they do, and it's really driven by the workers that they know they can attract.
Do you, I mean, do you ever get the comment or thought process of when they look at the map, a lot of our development and opportunity to expand companies or relocate companies are in the west side of Fort Worth, and from the cluster of the Metroplex, that's like the furthest part away from Plano, Frisco, the airport. Do people kind of say, hey, that's a great spot, but now we're pushing it because, in Fort Worth, we have that big east side gap of desert, right, and then the rest of the Metroplex kind of.
Right. Well, if you're companies that are looking at the far west, I mean, they're almost pulling from a different labor shed, so now you're pulling from West Fort Worth out to Weatherford. You're going down south to Burleson Crowley. So it's almost kind of a different draw of folks that you are looking at, as opposed to, downtown Fort Worth going east, which is a different kind of labor shed that you're pulling. But yeah, it's a different mix of talent. And so, while we've got all this available land in the West, one of the high points of that, we talk about the talent. You look at what's going on in Toledo, for example, in the school district down there. I mean, so you got these high performing school districts out to the west. That begins to draw some of this company interest. It says, okay, I can see some of the things that this ISD is doing. If that can lead to a talent base, you obviously have to get them through college, but if that gets through a talent base that will be open to staying here and being a part of this opportunity, then that can be good for us. And they're thinking, again, 5, 10 years, 12 years out. So I think that's what they're looking at when they're kind of looking at these far west opportunities.
You've mentioned the open space conservation program that recently got announced. Can you tell us more about what that is and how it came to be?
Well, I mean, so the open space program, there's really two pieces though. So the open space conservation program was really something that was worked on by a number of city departments, and it really was an opportunity to try to preserve open space. It's the name, but how we have been proposing to use it. I say proposing because we have not kind of formally taken this to the city council yet for approval. But what we've talked about is, as we're talking to some of these companies, as part of their incentive, they can utilize some of those funds to preserve open space in some other area of the community. And that, I would say Rivian was really the first company that we talked to about that, and it got some traction from them. They were really kind of intrigued by what that could look like. And again, They are very focused on having kind of a green carbon neutral footprint as much as they can, and so that really appealed to them. So I think as you continue to look at opportunities in that space, I think we'll have some more companies that might want to take advantage of that. But yeah, as of right now, it's not even officially policy. We've just kind of been putting it out there, but we plan to bring it forward when we update our Chapter 380 policy, which we hopefully will do later on this year. That'll be part of the discussion, is kind of codifying that as part of our 380 program.
Something we also kind of put out there in the national news was mining Bitcoin. And I know that successfully did a great job of, from clicks and compressions.
Sure.
And it seemed like there was a de-throttle of, that was kind of a gimmick, or that was a play. And it seems like 50% of the people are like, it's a gimmick. Hey, everyone calm down. But then there's like another 50% of leadership like, nah, we need to double down on this and like become this. So like, what is that looking like? And like, what can you share there?
Yeah. So the Bitcoin thing was interesting. I would say it was initially the thought was, look, this is a really good way for the city to show that we are thinking innovatively, that we welcome innovative companies and new technologies and things like that. So it was a little bit of a PR marketing play. But as we got into it, and as word started getting out that we were doing it, there was a lot of phone calls. I mean, we started having people in that space that were calling us like, oh, tell us more about the program and what are you guys doing and what does it mean? And so I think it did open our eyes a little bit as to, well, okay, is this, maybe there is something here that we can look at. Now, what was, a challenge about that is not too long after we made the announcement, the Bitcoin market went in the tank. And so now you've had all this kind of stress about where Bitcoin is going and what the overall value is going to be. I don't know that we ever saw ourselves, like Miami. I mean, they really were doubled down on Bitcoin and going hard after it. I don't know that we ever really considered Fort Worth going in that direction where we would get to the point where we were developing our own coin and everything. But are there Bitcoin operative, like what is that? What is the breadth of that industry look like? So it's not just the mining piece of it. I mean, mining you can do anywhere, as we've shown. But are there kind of offshoots of this industry that could maybe be a play for Fort Worth? And I know there's some smaller companies that are Bitcoin headquarters. So I think that's really where we're trying to go with it. I don't know, and I'll be the first to say I was a Bitcoin noob. I didn't know anything about it. And so, I had to do a lot of reading up just to understand it. But if you talk to, folks like the Texas Blockchain Council, I mean, they talk about how this could be a good initiative. You talk to folks like Les Crease, who's really kind of big into Bitcoin and promoting that. So I think there's players out there that can help us understand what the market is and what the opportunity is. So it wasn't, I would say it was a flash in the pan or a full on gimmick. It really was, we jumped out there with this idea showing that we're innovative. And then it was like, oh, well, wait a minute, there's a little bit more meat on this bone. And so let's kind of do some exploring on that and see what it looks like. And that's really where we're at. We're still kind of in that exploring stage of seeing what the opportunity is. And if there's something that makes sense, we'll pursue that. And if it's still a little bit untested and needs a little bit more time to mature and let the industry settle down a little bit from all the press they've been having lately, then, we'll kind of pivot and let that maturation occur.
Kind of nailing down further into the small business side, which Fort Worth has always really prided itself on having a robust small business community. Obviously, we had like the grant programs that you talked about. Now we've launched CDFI. What are some of the potential things on the horizon for continuing that support of small business, like you mentioned?
Yeah. So, well, two things. So there's been two committees, well, a committee and a task force. I'll be clear about it. So one, Mayor Parker appointed Leonard Firestone to chair a committee. So it's Entrepreneurship and Innovation Committee. And so Councilman Firestone said, well, I don't want to just have four council members sitting around a table talking to each other about small business and innovation. So let's open this up. And I think we've got 18 or so people on that committee. And it was really just an opportunity for people in the space to give us, kind of on the ground, what's happening, what are some of the trends you all are seeing, what are some of the challenges, and to really help us kind of think through what we should be doing, particularly to enhance innovation and opportunities. So we've had a lot of talk about, we've talked about some app development with, kind of expanding the Sparkyard initiative and what does that look like? We've talked about creating kind of this North Star, like what is Fort Worth's vision for entrepreneurship and innovation? So we've had, I think, 3 meetings so far. So it's still a lot of visioning and thinking through what that could mean. But I think just having those voices around the table and being able to talk about entrepreneurship and innovation will be key. Next few months, we're going to have Trey Bowles come in to talk about the TechStars initiative. Cameron's going to come talk about GEW. We brought a couple of folks in to talk about what other communities are doing. So we're going to just continue to explore that. And then I think there'll be some initiatives that come out of that. That we can try to push forward. As part of that, those land sales that I mentioned earlier that we set aside for the ED fund, we did take $1 million and set that aside for entrepreneurship initiatives. And so we've got a funding stream to help us develop programs and resources that may come out of the entrepreneurship committee. So we're very excited about that. The other piece of it is a small business task force that Councilmember Michael Crane established. And he had a little bit more of a different objective. So where Councilmember Firestone is really thinking kind of this big picture innovation piece, Councilmember Crane was really interested in understanding what are the pain points for our mom and pop brick and mortar stores, right? And he was kind of constantly hearing, yeah, we're just having problems with permitting. We can't get through the permitting process in a timely way. And for small businesses, it's a big challenge because, it's single person, maybe 2 folks, 3 folks that are trying to get this small business off the ground. They don't have time to come down to City Hall and wait all day to find out where their permit is. They don't have the resources to hire a firm to do that and use a third-party system. So they're kind of just stuck trying to navigate it themselves. And I think there's some ways that we could streamline the process for small businesses specifically. So, maybe if it's 25 employees or under, or 50 employees or under, maybe there's a super streamlined way that they could get through development and let that process happen very quickly. So that's where Councilmember Crane's focus has been, is okay, let's kind of deal with this specific obstacle of dealing with permitting specifically tied to small businesses. And then the other part of the equation that we've asked that task force to look at is the Business Assistance Center. So we've got the James Gwynn campus here. This has been kind of the one-stop shop for small businesses for over 20 years. But, as I mentioned when we started this, we have changed in the past few years. And I don't know that this model necessarily works as it did before the pandemic. And so, what does that look like? Do we continue, like the city owns the building, so we're obviously going to continue operating and owning the building and supporting the tenants that are here. But, what does programming look like? And is more of that stuff, is it more online stuff, which a lot of the partners here, they're still doing a lot of programming online. And so maybe, we switch to more online programming, and then we find some creative uses for these spaces. Maybe we can convert some to wet lab space, or maybe we, do some coding boot camps or something out of here. I mean, I think there's just some creative things that we can do with this center that would continue to help our small businesses, but just not in the traditional kind of workshops and things like that we've done. So that's really where the focus has been on the task force, is helping us kind of visualize and think through what could happen here at the Gwynn campus, and then to help on the permitting side of the house.
Yeah, as somebody who has opened a brick and mortar business here.
Yes, you know.
Yeah.
You definitely
like.
Yeah, you definitely. I'm on the small business task force. I think you should definitely talk to the researchers they're asking for people to do the research. They have researchers there and they want to talk. And I was like, they got to talk to Jimmy. I don't know why I'm here. They got to talk to Jimmy. So I'll definitely connect you.
Yeah, that'd be a good connection. Yeah.
I guess so. Last kind of question. I see we're at 50 minutes. We usually like to be under 60. So I guess kind of, is there anything you would like to say or anything that we did not touch? I mean, I have like 4 things I could hit, but and take it a different angle, but I know we kind of throw a lot at you. So is there anything you got?
No, that's, I would say, I think the past few years have been pretty interesting, and, and talking to you guys, we understand here at the city, and the chamber understands it. Like every time I click on a newsletter, or I open the business journal and I see some corporate announcement of some company coming anywhere other than Fort Worth, it drives me crazy. It really does. I mean, it is really like a punch in the gut. It's like, okay, well, why weren't we in the mix on this? And what are the things we need to do? So, we get it. I hear it. I understand the desire to really kind of be in the mix on these corporate headquarters, and obviously with the jobs and the investment, definitely understand that. So it's I've kind of talked about all these other things as far as revitalization of small business, but I kind of circling back to the fact that we are still kind of heavily focused on this corporate recruitment side, because it is important to us to try to attract those businesses, but it has to be done, in the right way. I mean, I don't necessarily want to give away the farm just to get someone here. It has to be balanced. But I think Fort Worth has a lot of opportunities, and what's frustrating to me as an economic development guy and someone who grew up in Fort Worth is I see all the opportunity, right? I see what a great community it is, and why that feeling or that story isn't translating into more success. I don't know that I have a real answer to that. I've talked to a few site selectors and said, hey, just tell me, what do you guys think about Fort Worth? What do you talk about Fort Worth? And it's like, we got nothing negative to say about Fort Worth. Great community, we like it. And when we get people here, that's the comments we receive. Hey, great community, we love it. People were really great, had a great time. So I'm not sure what it is. It's just not translating into we want to bring our company here, other than kind of that clustering thing that we talked about earlier. And until we get 1 or 2 companies to kind of make the decision, I still think we're going to struggle a little bit. But I think once we get those 1 or 2, I think you'll start to see some of that clustering happen. But you've got to get that early adopter that will either come here, or you've got to find the linear labs of the world who started here and are willing to grow here. And so, how do we continue to uplift what Brad's doing and ensure, as he's building out this facility, that translates into potential opportunities for us. So it's a little bit of a mixture of both things, but it's we get it. I hear it. Trust me, I hear it.
Well, and, what's cool though? Yeah, what's cool though? It's like, I feel like since you've been onto the pod, like you have more of a budget for marketing. It seems like it seems like we're doing all the right things. And, I think what we care about on the pod is just, supporting you all in the sense of it needs to be at a top priority, like tourism is, and how we do those things. And that's usually what we kind of advocate for. And we're really fans of what you guys are doing. And, thank you for definitely being on the pod.
Yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate all that you're doing. It's great just to have these different podcasts that have popped up about Fort Worth. And I'll be honest with that, I don't listen to all of them. I like to kind of get away from work every once in a while.
Makes sense.
But it's just great to see that people who are invested in the city, who care about the city, they're knowledgeable about what's going on, and just want to see the city be its best self. And I think having platforms like yours to talk about things that we're doing, talk about what other people are doing across the community, that's really helpful. And so we try to uplift and amplify you guys as much as we can, just to make sure people know that, hey, again, Fort Worth is not tiny Sleepyville. We are a very active, vibrant community, and we got a lot going on here.
Awesome. Perfect place to end, and really appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you,
Okay,
Robert.
yes, thanks. Appreciate it. Good talking to you.
There was a ton of information there. I feel like just as he was talking, I was like trying to consume and process at the same time. But that was a treasure trove of the behind the scenes of what economic development looks like here.
Yeah, you can't. I don't know. I feel like you can't get a better conversation right now about what is Fort Worth doing to position itself for the future. It really seems like, using a cowboy analogy, we're grabbing Fort Worth's future by the horns, and it seems like we're trying to jump in and do all these great things, because I feel like the last time we had this conversation, it was about right now. It was about the pandemic.
Yeah.
How do we react? How do we support our small businesses? And it just seems like now there's just this whole new plethora of opportunity happening. And there was tons of things I wanted to ask that I didn't ask, because I could just nerd out on this stuff. Genuinely, when we talk economic development on the pod, if you haven't known, it's always one of my favorite conversations.
Was there anything that stuck out to you the most?
To me, the thing that I kind of like, there's two parts, and I may do part one and then get your take on part one. Part one is like, I'm curious, like, what does the site selector process look like the RFP process, in the sense of like, I want to know, like, is it like 1995 and old school, or is it like pretty up to date? And is that something that, like, Michael Henning, his who he said is kind of seems like who does all that, is he like, oh, this process is just old school? And like, is that an issue? Like, is there a viable opportunity for some software startup to modernize the site collector process?
Yeah, the way he described it, it sounds very Excel pivot table-y, VLOOKUPs and HLOOKUPs. And
sounds like the AOL sign comes on. And it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. And then
I do think that's a good thought. And like, is there any gray area, And then are we developing things to hit so that will show up in that pivot table, whether that's a good thing, like the right thing, or maybe not as good of a thing? Like, I don't know, there can be, it's kind of teaching to the test, right? There's pros and cons to that. If they've just got an Excel spreadsheet that they downloaded and they're filtering out results that hit everything that people want.
I would just love to be like on the ground floor of what does that dynamic look like, because you got to kind of put on a show and radiate an image. And so what happens, people get off a plane, they stay the night. I'm assuming they're staying night downtown. Like, are you making sure it's the creme de la creme, the hotel knows they're there? Like, what's the full red carpet look? And I'd be interested. It just seems Manila, possibly.
Maybe we should try and ask economic development to take us on
exactly.
the red carpet, and we can give feedback for how to show off the city.
Yeah, I love it. Like, let's just do a little case study. Act as if me and Jimmy are new billionaires who just are looking. Who are looking.
We hit the Mega Millions. We won.
Yeah. We didn't use DFW. We used Alliance Airport because we're that big time.
No, we used Meacham Airport.
There you go. Yes, Meacham. What our PJ? We landed. What is the field? That's what would be interesting to know. My second kind of part was, he kind of talked about like this talent piece, and he kind of stopped. He's like, I think it's the number one. Let me not make it too big deal about it, but I do think the talent piece is big. And he mentioned how Frisco and Plano, because they were smaller areas, they were able to use their sales tax to economic development, which really gave them the leg up. But it seems like the overall story here is we're a legacy city, meaning we have a lot of historic government. We have a lot of historic public school systems. And, you know, when I think of Frisco and when I think of Plano, they're things that had a fresh slate to grow their talent and build brand new schools, and then to grow businesses simultaneously at the same time. And so it seems like, you know, that's going to ultimately be our biggest challenge, is that we're a legacy city. And so even the reference that he gave was Alito, which is like, you know, kind of like the Plano, where it's like the school. And it always seems like if you ask people, what do you think about Plano? And if you would have asked them that question 10 years ago, they probably would have said great schools. That's probably the first thing they say. Now there's tons of things, right? Japanese market's great. Oh, you got to go to Carrollton. There's just a lot of community and culture. And this goes back to like, I mentioned in the pod before about like a lot of these jobs, these technical jobs are being given by, are being managed, you know, immigrants, Asian American, who are getting these high technical jobs. And for us, you know, we didn't start out with that population or those universities to set that up for us.
Yeah.
So there's just like, you know, like not only do we have to get people to come to Fort Worth, it's like their kids' schools are probably in their family's eyes better in Plano. And so even if you get them, that full on switch is they're going to sacrifice the commute to stay in those schools. And I'm just, how can we build that pipeline being a legacy city? Because I don't think we currently are as well as we can.
Yeah, and I think that's where economic development works as a great resource for Fort Worth ISD and the city council, who are talking about trying to put together these programs for high school students to get them certifications in whatever they might need. So whether that's through Tarrant County College or just through some sort of skills program. I feel like economic development has that knowledge of what these companies are asking for talent base wise, and then obviously becomes a great resource for the people developing those programs to say, these are the things that we need to be focusing on and pushing people towards. And then, you know, that works with UTA also. Like, we've got an affordable commuter school really close to 15 minutes from downtown, essentially, that we can do the same thing with and funnel
and it seems like there's talent
here.
there, because there seems like, you know, they have the innovation center there. But I even think like I kind of did a tweet about this, and I sent you the story about the New York Times research done by the big famous researcher out of Stanford about economic connectedness. And it showed that the number one indicator for increasing economic prosperity for someone in poverty is them having interconnected relationships with people from different classes. So that means when rich and poor people collide and come together and build friendships. And they basically said the hotbed opportunity to do that is high school. Yeah. Which often goes to what we've always always jammed about, the importance of people going to your schools or like going to your public schools. And even if that's not ever going to happen here in Fort Worth, I think the true opportunity for the legacy cities to get their economic viability back from their suburbs is going to come from them be able to master economic connectedness, meaning, you know, the yous and I's of the world, we get rich or we get successful, and we don't want to live behind a gate. We don't want to live in a suburb, and we don't want to have our kids all around people who are safe, or, you know, safe, quote unquote, and put our kid in a bubble. And instead, we want economic connectedness because we see it as an advantage for our kid as they grow up. Whatever cities or metros do that from the legacy side, I think then can maybe start complementing their suburb sides that are currently taking a lot of their growth. For us, it's Alliance. For Dallas, it's Plano, Frisco. For Colorado, it's Boulder. For San Francisco and Oakland, it was San Jose and Palo Alto. It happens everywhere. It's literally happens everywhere. Because it's easier to start new and say, hey, we're going to build these schools and we're going to do all this. And I just, all innovation at the end of the day does come back though, right? Uber needs taxis today.
Yeah.
You know, like Airbnbs are, are going to start selling hotels. You know, like it all comes back to saying, oh, we're the new this, but then they actually just create an easier way to navigate the bureaucracy of these legacy places. And I think if Fort Worth could win on economic connectedness, so we lift up all people here, man, we're going to really show a case study for the rest of the country.
Yeah. One thing I was thinking about a lot in our conversation is one of the key sectors that they want to nail down in is energy. And, over the pandemic with the American Rescue Plan Act and other stimulus acts that have happened, I feel like Fort Worth, and we've talked about this, has managed that money really well and is putting that and allocating that to projects really well. Now, Joe Manchin finally agreed to a massive climate bill that is going to put tons and tons of money into solar.
What do you think this next quarter, how high do you think Biden's approval rating goes? What do you think it is? You think it goes up any? I mean, come on now. Climate bill, chips, the Inflation Act stuff. The gas is low.
Yeah.
The terrorist he just got, the second man to Bin Laden. I mean,
so that's the thing is he's been doing a lot of really big stuff the whole time.
Yeah.
And
100%.
Just hasn't been messaged well. I agree with you. And I think what just happened in Kansas with the abortion election is a big indicator of maybe people's opinions right now. But one of the big pieces for this new energy act is solar. There is going to be tons and tons of money and incentives put into solar. So I'm sure that they are looking at that already, but Fort Worth has always had oil and gas as a bell cow. How do we be ahead of the game on solar as we're starting to see a ton of money get poured into that federally? We've got the sun for it,
Absolutely, we do. My grass will tell you we do.
Yeah. So that's something I was thinking about a lot is that's going to be a massive opportunity for the cities and communities that are able to get those companies to come there.
Yeah.
We've got space, we've got the sun.
Yeah.
We could easily, it seems, use solar as another bell
and that
cow.
is the positive that we have is that Frisco and Plano are already at capacity.
Yeah.
So now it's just going to further places, right? North.
Right.
We, on the other hand, have it right here. And then you get that urban touch that your professional workforce maybe aspires to have.
Mm-hmm.
Going to the Biden wrench I threw in there, I think we're going to get double digits. You don't think we can go from, what is he, 30? What is he, 39%? We don't think he can get to 49%? Democrats, because that means a lot of Democrats are anti him right now.
Yeah.
So if you just get them to say, hey, we're good, maybe it can happen.
It's going to go up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't pay attention to, in general.
Approval ratings, whatever.
Yeah.
So you said Kansas. What about that with, does that make you feel any aspirational about Beto pulling this off? No. I just saw your face. They can't see your face. They can't see your face.
I'm not going to get my hopes up. You
saw my yard. I don't know, man. I think I'm getting too excited.
It's odd. Okay, there's a lot that has come out of Kansas that I think potentially shows that the super anti-abortion stance of people currently in office on the right was maybe a misstep. Since the Dobbs decision came out, 70% of new registered voters in Kansas were women. it was like 20% of people showed up only to vote on abortion. Like they didn't even vote in the primary elections.
Yeah.
Which, whatever. I'm like, you're there. It's going to take 2 seconds for you to fill out the other things. But like, that's to me says that this is a topic that people are really passionate about and not at the percentages that would favor the right. So will the same happen in Texas? I don't know. That I'm sure that nobody's going to try and pull a state amendment in November after seeing what that just did to Kansas.
Yeah.
Is Kansas going to flip blue in November? No. But I mean, it makes me optimistic nationally. But I'm going to hold my breath on Texas.
Yeah. Well, I know we have more pods to discuss all this as we'll be able to talk more as it comes to November and things like that. But again, thank you, Robert Sturns, for coming on. We always enjoy when you share updates, and big fans of what you guys are doing. And for everyone who's listening, if you made it all the way to the end, that means you're like a super awesome person who believe in us. If you haven't, given a review, a 5-star, even Spotify does it now. I don't know if you saw. We got like 4.6 stars on Spotify.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. You think that's good?
That was after we filtered out everybody that, hates us.
I don't know how it works. But if you could, just give us a glowing review. Because as Robert said, there's a ton of podcasts, share why you like this one. That's all I got.
Yeah. Thanks again, Robert. Fort Worth is lucky to have you and your team. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you again next week.
Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life, control your life. Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, like double tap. Now they control your life, control your life.